So welcome back. Week 4 this week. The weeks just flit by, don't they? And so, tonight it'll be a similar program to the previous evenings, in as much as we'll look at the next part of the sutta. We'll go into the breakout rooms, and we're going to look at the fourth stage tonight. And we're also going to look at the part of the practice where we do the equalizing. I'll say more about that later on, and then we'll meditate, and then we'll set up our practice for the week. But just before we do all that, I just wanted to start, as we have been doing, by having just a short meditation, and I'll read the Metta Sutta, and I'm going to read another translation. And this one is very, very succinct. It's almost quite it's almost abrupt, actually, but it's a very, very condensed translation. The translator, whose name is Vipassy, has just kind of tried to get the Metta Sutta across in as few words as possible. So, I'll read that to start with. So if you'd just like to set yourself up in a way that you're going to be comfortable for the next few minutes, and just relax into yourself, let the day slide away into the background, and just connect with what's going on, how you are, where you are. And one really good way, one kind of default way even to connect, is just to become aware of your breathing, and just particularly allowing the exhalation to soothe any sense of tension or agitation or strain. So just allowing the breath to help you drop down into the body and also into the heart. And without straining or forcing, just settling the mind in the body on the breath. Metta Sutta. If you know your own good and know where peace dwells, then this is the task. Lead a simple and frugal life, uncorrupted, capable and just. Be mild, speak soft, eradicate conceit, keep appetites and senses calm. Be discreet and unassuming. Do not seek rewards. Do not have to be ashamed in the presence of the wise. May everything that lives be well, weak or strong, large or small, seen or unseen, here or elsewhere, present or to come, in heights or depths, may all be well. Have that mind for the whole world. Get rid of lies and pride. A mother mind for her baby, her love, but now unbounded. Secure this mind of love. No enemies, no obstructions, wherever or however you may be. It is sublime, this. It escapes birth and death, losing lust and delusion, and living in the truth. So over the last few weeks, we've been looking at the Metta Sutta, and I just wanted to give you a bit of a sense of the ground that we've covered. So we looked at, in the first week, this idea that the Sutta starts with a glimpse of the goal, and the goal being peace. And how if we want to follow that peace, the Buddha is saying we need to follow a path. And the path consists of ethics, meditation, and wisdom. And it's all particularly focused on the quality of metta. Metta as the basis of ethics, metta as a way of meditating, and also metta as a means to attain wisdom. And then in the second week, we saw that the path starts with laying ethical foundations. So actually looking at different qualities that we need to bring into being to express metta in our life. And there's 14 of these qualities. We also saw that it's really helpful, almost even crucial, to learn from people which are more experienced than us. So to actually have that direct contact with people who we can learn from. And then last week, in the third week, we looked at the verse which says, "May all beings be happy and feel secure. May all beings become happy in their heart of hearts." So in a way, it's the essence of what we're wishing. It's the essence of what metta is. We want beings to have happiness and security, which is the basic desires that we have, the deep desires that we have as human beings or even as living beings. And we saw that when we say, "May all beings be happy," what we're really saying is maybe they be those whose self is happiness. In other words, we want happiness to be something that, not that they have, but something that they are. Metta, happiness, is something that they should be. So trying to really get to grips last week with what metta actually is, what the attitude is that we're trying to cultivate towards other beings. And then we get this verse about the kind of universality of metta, and think of every living thing without exception, the weak and the strong, from the smallest to the largest, and so on. So it's really about seeing the whole diversity of living beings, all the different kinds of living beings, and not excluding any kind of living being, any kind of human being or other kind of being from metta. So of course, that starts that process of the universal scope and object of metta, which is all beings. We start by particular beings, by looking at particular beings, and we move from one being to another being. And so we're really starting to get to grips with what we actually feel about actual people, what our attitudes are to actual people. First of all, there's ourself, of course, and then there's our friend. So each week we've been adding a new stage. So the first week we just were becoming aware of ourself and looking to cultivate an attitude of well-wishing towards ourself. And then in the second week, we looked at the second stage about developing metta for a good friend. So developing metta for somebody who there's probably already some sort of good feeling towards, somebody who we want to be well. And then the third stage, in the third week, we looked at the neutral person. So that was last week. So looking at including in our metta somebody that we wouldn't normally notice. So we're starting to universalize our metta by moving beyond what is comfortable, moving beyond what is kind of usual, and actually trying to cultivate metta towards strangers, towards all those people in the world who we don't have a personal relationship with and for whom we don't have a strong feeling of attraction or aversion. And so this week we move into the fourth stage, and here it becomes a little bit more challenging. So this is what the Buddha says in the next verse in the Metta Sutta. He says, "May no one deceive or look down on anyone, anywhere, for any reason. Whether through feeling angry or through reacting to someone else, may no one want another to suffer." So wanting somebody else to suffer, of course, is the opposite of metta. It's aversion, it's ill will, it's even hatred. and it expresses itself as cruelty. So that's the most extreme form of the opposite of metta. But there's all sorts of shades in between, from mild irritation to sort of violent rage. What the Buddha says to begin with is just don't deceive other living beings. So again, the quality of honesty is emphasized. And usually when we deceive, we're putting our needs over the needs of somebody else. That's the reason we're not being truthful. We're manipulating the facts in order to gain some kind of advantage, usually. So that's the first thing. But really, the key thing is to address the fact that there is we do have the capacity to generate aversion to other people, and in this stage of the practice, we encounter that. We almost confront that. In some ways, sometimes I sort of think about the Metta Bhavana. It's a little bit like not letting sleeping dogs lie. In a way, you're kind of waking them up and trying to pacify them so that they're no longer angry dogs, but sort of sweet dogs. If that's probably stretching the metaphor a bit far, but the point is, you're actually trying to work with that tendency of responding to something that you don't like with aversion, and to do that, you actually bring to mind someone who you find difficult. And really what we're trying to do with this practice is basically, as it were, unhook the attitude of metta from a particular individuals and just be able to have it for whoever we encounter. And that's generally, I think, what we're trying to do with Metta Bhavana, is learn to meet whatever arises in our life and in our mind, and whoever we meet in our life and even in our mind with kindness. That's what we're really trying to do. So what we need to bring this particular aspect of life to mind. And the fact is that for all of us, there will be people, there will be experiences that are not welcome, that we don't like, and this tendency towards aversion will arise. And I think it's really important that we acknowledge that when aversion arises, it's something that we're actually doing. We often talk about it like it's something that's happening to us, but a big part of what the Dharma is about, and the big part of what Metta Bhavana is about, is actually owning and acknowledging and taking responsibility for what's actually going on in our mind. And particularly this is the case with the fourth stage, because we don't like to think of ourselves often as people who have hateful thoughts or aversive thoughts. It's maybe not very comfortable to acknowledge that. And it's really worth remembering that it's kind of, well, a couple of things that are worth remembering. One is that it's natural. It's natural for aversion to arise. So in a way, you don't need to feel bad about it. There's no value in feeling bad about it. But what we do need to acknowledge is that it's harmful, and we need to do something about it if we want to be happy, because aversion is profoundly destructive of our own well-being, let alone what happens if we express it towards others. Then it becomes destructive towards others as well. And if it becomes a collective thing, as we know from looking at the pages of history and looking at the newspaper, it can be like terribly, frighteningly, devastatingly destructive. So that all starts in the hearts of human beings. So we need to acknowledge that, not feel bad about it, that doesn't help, but just acknowledge, actually right now there's aversion going on. And again, remembering back to the beginning of the course, the Buddhist vision of a human being is that we are dynamic. So we can create ourselves in a different way. We can learn to meet unpleasant, unwelcome experiences with kindness. We can actually do that. It's possible to do that. So that's what this fourth stage is about. And what we do in the fourth stage is we bring to mind somebody who we find difficult. So traditionally, actually, it's worth noting that the language is that we think of an enemy. So we think of somebody who's actively trying to harm us. Now, hopefully you don't have anybody in your life who's trying to actively harm you. If you do, what I'd recommend, if you're starting out with this practice, don't think of them just at the moment. Maybe leave it for a little while before you bring that person to mind. It might just be a little bit too much to deal with. Try and think of somebody who's just makes your life awkward or difficult or painful in some way, but not somebody who's actively trying to harm you. So having said that, I think there's a reason that we bring to mind, or the reason that it's called the enemy stage. And that is because we do have the tendency to think of people in that kind of way, to think in quite black and white terms about friends and foe, and that's deeply embedded in our kind of psychological DNA, so to speak. We perceive people as being a threat, and that for that reason, the expression enemy feels appropriate. What's really interesting to notice is that even people who aren't really a threat, that same instinct of a threat response arises. Even if actually we're not in danger, we feel that we are. And that's why I think it can be appropriate to use the word enemy. Sometimes we just talk about a difficult person, but sometimes I feel that's a slight euphemism, if you said to me, a way of kind of minimizing the actual reality of our lives, which strong emotions arise in response to things and people that we don't like. So what we do is in this stage, and as we do in the other stages, is we bring to mind someone that we find difficult, and we just sit with them, so to speak, and we just allow ourselves to respond to their presence, as it were. At the same time, we try and allow that momentum of metta to meet them as well, if you see what I mean. So we've built up a little bit of momentum, hopefully, but at this stage, for ourselves, for our friend, for the neutral person. It might not feel like we have, but there will be an added quality to our appreciation of them. And again, we're just trying to acknowledge the fact, we're trying to recognize the fact that they want for their own well-being in the same way that we do. There's no difference. And actually, kind of in a way, putting aside the fact that we find them difficult and just trying to see them as a living being who wants to be well, who wants to be happy, who wants to be free from suffering, who wants to feel secure, who wants to grow and develop. Those things are exactly the same, so we can include them in our metta also. So it doesn't mean that we pretend that we like them, and it doesn't mean that we have to be nice. There's a place for resisting somebody behaving in a unaware, unkind way towards us. Yeah, so it doesn't mean that we have to let people treat us badly. That's very important to recognize. And generally speaking, if somebody is treating us badly and we have metta for them, if we get into communication with them, it's much more likely that they will be able to respond to us if there's metta there. But if we just respond out of aversion, it'll tend to perpetuate the dynamic between the two people. So I just wanted to make that point, because I think sometimes people hear this talk about metta as becoming a bit of a walkover, or becoming almost like a doormat that people can just wipe their dirty feet on. And it really isn't that, because of course, if that's the way you respond to other people, you're not actually honoring your own desire for well-being, which is part of what metta is. And I'll talk about that a little bit later on. So one of the things that aversion does is it distorts. When there's aversion present, we tend to see things, but we get things out of, we can see something even that's true and that's real, but we get it out of proportion. So you particularly notice this, well, I particularly notice it, if there's somebody who is a good friend of mine or a member of my family, and, I have a really good relationship with them, and they do something that I don't like, maybe that I find painful, and it's as if when that aversion is there, all of the things that I appreciate about them, all the things that they might have done for me over the course of my life, I forget about all those things. I just focus in on this one incident or this one thing that they said or one thing that they did that I really didn't like, and everything else is as if it goes out the window. So that's one of the things about aversion, that it accentuates or highlights, to the exclusion of everything else, the things about that person that we find difficult. In the same way that love does the opposite. Love, when we love somebody, all we can see is what we like about them. All the other things we can't see. So one of the ways of working with aversion is just to redress the balance. So just to try and notice what it is about that person that we do appreciate, and remember that when we're in the grip of aversion. This is especially the case, I think, with people that we love, friends or family members and so on. With people who may be like our boss, it might be more difficult to approach it in this way. But we can still remember that even if we've got an aversive attitude towards somebody else, other people will benefit from their presence. They might have children, or if you see what I mean. So we try and just redress the balance and become a little bit more reasonable. And that kind of approach can help as well. So I just wanted to mention that. If you've got more, we'll do the practice later on. But I did just want to mention that the fourth stage in response, or as a way of unpicking that verse. May no one deceive or look down on anyone anywhere for any reason, whether through feeling angry or through reacting to someone else. May no one want another to suffer. So it's kind of it's like the other side of may all beings become happy in their heart of hearts. And it's acknowledging that it's not as easy as that, is it? It's not as easy as just, may everyone be well, and then the heart is completely transformed. That we do have to meet this very, I was going to say violence, in a way it can be quite violent force of aversion, which was within us. And just going right back to the first week, remembering that we have the capacity to be at peace. We have the capacity to completely let go of that aversive tendency, to transform it completely. So that's really crucial that we remember that. So that's basically all I was going to say about the fourth stage. We'll do it a bit later on. What we're going to do now is we'll go into our breakout rooms. So so the next verse is as follows. As strongly as a mother, perhaps risking her life, cherishes her child, her only child, develop an unlimited heart for all beings. So you've got the image of a mother's love for her child, which is powerful and deeply felt. And furthermore, a mother's love for her child will be, the child wants their child to grow, to develop. It's interesting, my sister's recently had a child, quite relatively late in life, and he's 4 now. And it's just lovely noticing how everybody in the family, it's the only grandchild, they're so interested in this boy's development. And everybody wants him to grow, particularly, obviously, my sister. It just seems to be something very, very basic to our humanity, that we love seeing growth and development in children. So that's what's being pointed towards. There's lots of other aspects of, like I was saying, that kind of nurturing, caring, responsive kind of love. So the Buddha's saying the kind of metta, the kind of attitude that we're trying to cultivate towards other beings is we're talking about something powerful. We're talking about something strong. But we're not talking about something exclusive or limited. So we're to develop an unlimited heart for all beings. So aparamana is the word for unlimited. It literally means that it's been unbounded or unlimited. So again, it's this idea that we start with ourselves as a friend, and then we're kind of trying to start with cultivating this attitude, and then making it less and less exclusive and more inclusive, you could say, more and more sort of like a radiation of an attitude that will just fall on whatever it falls on, in the same way that the sun doesn't distinguish about what it's going to illuminate and what it's not going to illuminate. The sun, he just illuminates all. So trying to develop metta in that kind of way. So again, the practice is structured in such a way as we've got a place to start, and then we move from there. I sometimes think of it a little bit like lighting a fire. Like, when you light a fire, you start with small, like maybe paper and a few twigs, a bit of kindling or sticks, and then maybe something a little bit bigger. And then the fire starts to generate its own heat. And then you can put bigger pieces of fuel on it. But only then. If you put them on too soon, it smothers the flames. So it's a little bit like that with the Metta Bhavana. You're getting something started, and you might have to blow on it a little bit. But you just keep creating the conditions for the fire to grow. And that's what you're doing with Metta Bhavana. You're just creating the conditions for that spark to develop into a flame, to develop some heat. And then, of course, what happens when you get a fire going, it's got its own heat going. You can just keep putting more and more fuel on it, and it will just keep burning it up, and more heat and light is produced. So I think metta is a little bit like that. It's a matter of approaching it incrementally, but having a sense of where it can go. So I think it's really worth reflecting on that verse. As strongly as a mother, perhaps risking her child, cherishes her child, her only child, develop an unlimited heart for all beings. So it's not just that it's a child, it's her only child. And the text literally says that, eka putta, one, eka means one, putta means child, her only child. It's like the Buddha's really trying to say, this is something powerful, folks, and it's something unlimited, to try and imagine those two things. So there's this really crucial, in terms of this process of moving from individuals to everybody, there's an important part of the practice. So we've talked about the first three stages, the friend, oneself, the friend, the neutral person, the difficult person, which we've yet to do, but we'll do later. And then there's a stage, there's the fifth stage, and the fifth stage is all about this expansion. It's about, in a way, unhooking your metta from particular individuals and radiating it out to everybody. But there's this bit before you do that. So after the fourth stage, but before the radiation, there's a bit where you bring to mind each of the four people that you've had in your practice so far, and you do what's called, rather inelegantly, but there's probably no better word for it, equalizing. You try and equalize your metta. In other words, you try and recognize that desire for well-being, happiness, freedom, and growth is as equally urgent, as equally important, as equally vital for each of those four individuals. So you're trying to universalize something which has been particular. So I really, really want to be happy. And actually that person does, and that person does, and that person does. We all really, really want that. So I should, as it were, feel metta for each person equally. That's the kind of rational response. And in the tradition, there's a kind of a little story which illustrates this, and the story is that you're in a coach, like an old stagecoach, and this is several hundred years ago, and you're driving at night along a very remote road, and the coach. I always, for some reason, now that I live in Ireland, I always think of the road from Dublin to Galway. So we're talking 200, 300 years ago. You can imagine how dark and lonesome that road would have been in certain parts. And at a certain time in the night, you're accosted by highwaymen. Okay, so these very, very frightening men stop the stagecoach, and basically what they say is that one of you is going to be killed, and you have to decide who that's going to be. Now, the four people in the stagecoach are you, your friend, the neutral person, and the difficult person. And the story goes that if you have really mastered this part of the practice, you won't be able to decide. You won't be able to decide who you think should be killed. You'll be unable to make a choice. So that's the kind of the mood of that particular part of the practice. And then, of course, what we do, and we'll do this next week, is you just start including more and more people of different kinds in the way that this sort of suggests, where it says, and think of every living thing without exception, the weak and the strong, from the smallest to the largest, whether you can see them or not, living nearby or far away, beings living now or yet to arise, may all beings become happy in their heart of hearts. So that's for next week. But what we're going to do this week is we're going to just do that part of the practice. So we'll do the first stage, the second stage, the third stage, the fourth stage. So self, friend, neutral person, difficult person, and then we'll do this equalizing stage. And then we'll just sit for a bit at the end. So just to say, it'll be a wee bit longer than we've been doing. We've been doing about 25 minutes. This will be more like 30 minutes. And I just wanted to mention, just before we do that, just one thing about the phrases. So the important thing to remember about the phrases is to check that they're really meaningful, and not just saying them in a mechanical fashion. Yeah, so they're actually, you really mean them. You're not just rattling them off in a kind of unconscious way. And you might find that when you get into the practice, you don't need to say them all that much. You might even just say one of the phrases. So it might just be, may you be free from suffering. That might be enough. It's just to get something moving. It's a little bit like the match that you put to the paper to get the fire lighted. Once it's lit, you don't need another match. You might need to blow on it a little bit, which might be one of the other phrases, but just trust that the momentum is there. So you might just use the phrases quite sparingly, but it can be helpful just to use them at the beginning, just to get things going a little bit. So yeah, I just wanted to say that. So what we'll do is we'll actually just, if you just want to set yourself up for meditation, and we'll do that when you're ready. So again, just tuning into what's actually happening And a good way of starting that is just to have a sense of where you are. What's your direct, immediate physical experience of the room that you're sitting in? A sense of physical space. Having a direct sense of the sounds that are taking place. And a direct sense of your body. And just trusting that if we pay attention and we make effort, then things will open up, things will unfold. Maybe not all at once, but over time, our mind will be transformed. Just like the constant falling of drops of water will eventually fill a pail or a barrel. In the same way, just by the consistent application of appropriate effort, our mind will begin to become filled with metta, the energy that manifests as aversion will be released. So really getting a sense of our body and the sensations of our body. And also the way that our heart is, the way that our mind is, and just being gentle, being caring towards ourselves, particularly if we're distressed or stressed or agitated or upset. Just having a sense of kindness for ourselves, just the way a mother would respond to a distressed child, with sensitivity and love. We could actually call ourselves by our name. With a kind, caring, compassionate voice. And just moving from there to the first stage of the practice. You might already be there, as it were. So metta for yourself. Using the phrases if you wish. Feeling the import and the weight of the words. So if you're struggling for an approach, just stick with a phrase. So to remind you, the phrases are may I be well, may I be happy, may I be free from suffering, may I grow and develop. And check that you're relaxed. Check that you're not straining or forcing something in an unnatural way or an unkind way. And then bring to mind a good friend, appreciating their particularity, their particular character, the way they express themselves, their uniqueness. And then developing metta for your friends also. Again, you could use the phrases, may you be well, may you be happy, may you be free from suffering, may you grow and develop. So using the phrases in a way that feels appropriate, neither too slack or too forced. And then just allowing that friend to move into the background for the moment. And just again checking that you're relaxed, that your face is relaxed, particularly your forehead and your eyes, your shoulders and your belly. Check that your attitude towards yourself is kind. Maybe you need to go back to that caring, sensitive, compassionate presence for yourself. And then bring to mind a neutral person. So bringing them to mind as vividly as you can. So we're really getting a sense of them as an actual, real, living being who exists, who feels, who knows things, who wants things, and including them in our metta, using the phrases as feels appropriate. And then allowing that person to move into the background. And again, just checking that you're relaxed, that you're not forcing or straining. And just sit with yourself. And then bring to mind someone you find difficult, an enemy even. And remember that there's more to that person than just the difficulty you have with them. So trying to see them from their side, not only from our side. And including them in our metta also. So directing the positive attitude that we will have by now to that person that we find difficult. Again, using the phrases as appropriate. And now, including in your metta yourself, together with your friend, together with the neutral person, together with the person you find difficult. Acknowledging that each person wants for their own well-being, happiness, freedom, and growth. And because that's a fact, we just let our metta flow equally towards each, not excluding ourselves, not excluding our friend, not excluding the neutral person, not excluding the difficult person. May we all be happy in our heart of hearts. And then just sit. So let go of trying to do anything particular and just sit. Just letting that momentum of awareness and love continue without consciously trying to develop it. So just sitting. All right, so just leaving the meditation there. So in terms of the home practice this week, again, if you're newer to the practice, what I suggest you do is just follow the lead through that I just did on the video. It's a bit longer than it's been. It was 30 minutes long, so you'll need a bit longer in your day. And even if you've been practicing for a while, try and bring something. You would have had some kind of little insight or some perspective from tonight that you could bring into your practice. Just make that conscious. What is that going to be? And then, in terms of off the meditation question, what I suggest you do is just watch out for blame. Often aversion is connected with the instinct to blame. So if something happens that we don't like or that we don't think is good, we often look for someone to blame. Sometimes that person is actually responsible, but very often they're not. And even if they are, we've got to ask ourselves, does it really help to blame, to find a culprit that we think is bad? And just see if we can give people the benefit of the doubt, but also just take responsibility for the fact that when we blame, we're actually doing that. It's not happening to us, we're doing it. And if you're not convinced, you could just ask yourself the question, if there's blame in your mind, ask yourself the question, who is this helping? Who is this helping? Is it helping you? Is it helping somebody else? Is it helping other people? Like really, who is it helping? And that can somehow help us to not do it if we're really convinced that it's actually of no benefit to anybody. So in terms of the reading, I've already mentioned don't worry too much about keeping up, but if you do want to keep up, the reading for this week is chapter 4, the culmination of Metta. And so hopefully that's been of some interest to you tonight, and it's stimulated a few thoughts, and hopefully also stimulated a few ways of thinking about and approaching the Metta Bhavana that open it out a little bit, that make more things possible. And I just wanted to thank Rob, who stepped in for Amy tonight. So thanks very much, Rob. He just stepped in at the last minute, and thanks so much for doing that. And so I think there's a couple of minutes for questions. I'll stop the recording now. But so if there's any questions, just hang around and I'll see if I can respond to them.